Empath or trauma? The question that changes everything. You feel everything. The tension in the room. The sadness behind someone's smile. The unspoken energy in every conversation. People say you're deeply intuitive, maybe even an empath. And maybe you are. But here's the hard truth. Sometimes what we think is empathy is actually unhealed trauma in disguise. Hyper-awareness, overgiving, emotional exhaustion, it can feel like sensitivity, but it's often a nervous system stuck in survival mode. The question isn't just, am I an empath? It's, is this sensitivity coming from my soul? Or, from my scars? This video will walk you through 7 powerful distinctions to help you tell the difference between true empathic gifts and trauma-based patterns. It's not about labeling yourself, it's about reclaiming your energy, your clarity, and your peace. Let's decode the difference, so you can stop confusing wounding for wisdom, and start standing in your true sensitivity with power. 1. Emotional absorption versus hypervigilance. One of the key differences between being an empath and living from unresolved trauma is why and how you absorb the emotions of others. Empaths are naturally attuned to the emotional energy of people and environments. This sensitivity is often calm, intuitive, and non-reactive. For example, an empath might walk into a room and subtly notice tension or joy without effort. They feel the undercurrents without needing to analyze or protect themselves. This ability comes from deep emotional awareness, not fear. However, when someone is operating from trauma, especially childhood trauma like emotional neglect or unpredictable caregiving, their emotional sensitivity is often rooted in hypervigilance. They've been trained, often unconsciously, to stay on high alert in order to predict and manage other people's emotional states to stay safe. In this case, absorbing emotions is not intuitive, it's defensive. The nervous system remains in a heightened state, scanning for threat, tone shifts, or mood changes. This can create exhaustion, anxiety, and confusion. Am I picking this up because I'm intuitive, or because I'm afraid? True empathy does not require emotional distress to function. Hypervigilance, however, keeps you in a survival loop, mistaking fear-based attunement for genuine empathy. One clear sign is this: do you feel a compulsive need to understand or manage how others feel, or do you feel peaceful simply noticing? Learning to pause and ask this question helps differentiate between empathic intuition and trauma-fueled emotional monitoring. Healing involves calming the nervous system so your sensitivity becomes a gift, not a burden. 2. Healthy boundaries versus people-pleasing. Empaths have the capacity to deeply care for others, but a true empath operates with boundaries intact. They understand that their energy is sacred and that overextending themselves leads to depletion. Their yes is honest, and their no is rooted in self-awareness, not guilt. In contrast, someone operating from trauma often struggles to maintain healthy boundaries. People-pleasing becomes a survival strategy learned early in life, often from environments where love was conditional or inconsistent. Saying yes becomes a way to avoid rejection, criticism, or abandonment. These individuals may feel intense guilt or fear when asserting their needs or disappointing others. They confuse acceptance with compliance and often mistake over-accommodation for kindness. While an empath may feel others' disappointment, they don't collapse under it. A trauma survivor, however, may suppress their needs, ignore their limits, and smile through discomfort, not because they want to, but because their nervous system equates pleasing others with being safe. The key difference lies in emotional motivation. Empaths act from connection. People-pleasers act from fear. One reflective question to ask is, do I help because I want to, or because I'm afraid not to? If there's tension, dread, or resentment attached to your acts of giving, it may be a trauma pattern in disguise. Healing involves reclaiming your right to say no, trust your worth apart from your usefulness, and recognize that love doesn't require self-abandonment. 3. Emotional regulation versus emotional entanglement. A true empath can feel someone else's emotional experience deeply, yet still knows how to distinguish it from their own. They're like a lighthouse, aware of storms around them, but anchored in their own steady ground. Emotional regulation allows them to be present without being consumed. However, Someone living from trauma often becomes emotionally entangled with others, losing sight of where they end and the other person begins. They may feel intense anxiety when someone else is upset, interpreting it as a personal failure or responsibility. This often stems from early environments where emotional boundaries were blurred. Perhaps a parent who relied on the child for emotional support, or punished them for expressing needs. As a result, they learn to absorb others' feelings as a way to stay connected or maintain harmony. While an empath can feel compassion and still stay centered, an emotionally entangled person feels overwhelmed, compelled to fix, and emotionally hijacked by others' distress. They may say, "I just feel everything," but in reality, they never learn to feel safely. A helpful signal is noticing whether you feel drained and confused after emotional exchanges. Or grounded and clear. Do you take on the weight of others' problems unconsciously? Healing this involves learning to identify your own emotional state, practicing emotional differentiation, and honoring your right to emotional independence. You are allowed to feel with someone, but not for them. 4. Compassion versus codependency. Compassion is a core trait of an empath. It's the ability to hold space for someone's pain without needing to control, fix, or lose yourself in it. It flows from the heart, not from a wound. An empath's compassion is empowering, allowing others their full experience while offering presence and support. In contrast, someone operating from trauma may express what seems like compassion, but it's actually codependency. They need to be needed. Their self-worth is tied to being the fixer, the helper, or the savior. This pattern is often rooted in early dynamics where they had to become emotionally responsible for others to receive love. Codependency isn't about love, it's about survival. The lines between caring and controlling get blurred. You may find yourself prioritizing others' needs at your own expense, feeling anxious when you're not helping, or defining your value through your usefulness. Unlike true compassion, which feels expansive, codependency feels heavy, urgent, and exhausting. A good question to reflect on is, am I helping because I genuinely want to, or because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't? Empaths give from fullness, codependents from depletion. Healing codependency involves reconnecting to your own needs, practicing self-care without guilt, and realizing that love doesn't require you to carry someone else's emotional burdens. 5. Connection versus trigger. Empaths experience connection through resonance, a gentle, intuitive link between energies. They feel when they're in tune with someone, and this connection often feels peaceful, grounded, and expansive. There is no rush, no urgency, just a natural flow. On the other hand, those operating from trauma often confuse being emotionally triggered for being emotionally connected. If you grew up in unstable or emotionally intense environments, your nervous system may equate chaos, emotional highs and lows, or unpredictability with closeness. You might say, "I feel so drawn to them," but what you're actually feeling is your trauma being activated. You're subconsciously revisiting familiar dynamics that mirror the intensity of your early relationships. This is why trauma bonds often masquerade as chemistry or deep connection. They feel intense, but they're not healthy. They keep you in cycles of emotional instability, over-identification, and anxious attachment. True empathic connection doesn't drain you, it nourishes you. Triggers, on the other hand, leave you exhausted, confused, or spiraling. One powerful distinction is asking, does this relationship feel safe and stable, or does it keep me chasing emotional highs and lows? When you're healed, peace becomes attractive, not chaos. Empaths seek resonance. Trauma survivors often chase familiarity. Healing involves learning to recognize safety as a sign of true connection, not boredom. 6. Service versus self-sacrifice. A healed empath enjoys being of service, but from a place of overflow. They give intentionally, not compulsively, and they know when to pull back and rest. They understand that they are not the solution to everyone's problems and that being of service does not mean sacrificing their well-being. In contrast, someone living from trauma often equates giving with survival. They may have learned that their needs were secondary, or that their value came from how much they could give. As a result, they overfunction in relationships, workplaces, and families. They ignore their own limits, push past burnout, and minimize their own needs in order to feel worthy. Their helping is often accompanied by exhaustion, resentment, or a quiet hope that someone will finally notice their suffering. The pattern isn't just generosity, it's martyrdom. Empaths ask, "Do I have the capacity to help right now?" Trauma-driven givers never stop to ask, they feel guilty if they don't help. A key sign is whether your giving feels like a choice, or an obligation. Self-sacrifice often leads to bitterness, while true service leaves you with a quiet sense of alignment. Healing means embracing the truth that your needs matter too. It's not selfish to rest. It's sacred. 7. Intuition versus anxiety. Empathic intuition is calm, subtle, and wise. It often comes as a quiet knowing or a gut feeling that doesn't carry panic. Intuition is not reactive. It's receptive. It doesn't shout. It whispers. You feel something without needing to fix or fear it. It's connected to presence. In contrast, someone operating from unresolved trauma may mislabel anxiety as intuition. This is understandable, especially if past experiences taught you that the world is unsafe, unpredictable, or threatening. Your body becomes trained to anticipate harm, and every ambiguous situation triggers hypervigilant thoughts. Anxiety often masquerades as just a feeling I have, but instead of grounding you, it spins you into analysis, dread, or avoidance. Trauma-driven intuition is usually loud, urgent, and laced with fear. It's not a quiet nudge. It's a blaring alarm. Learning to distinguish between the two is critical. Ask, does this inner signal feel calm and clear? Or frantic and overwhelming? Intuition offers clarity even in discomfort. Anxiety offers chaos without resolution. Healing means learning to soothe your nervous system so that your intuitive voice becomes clearer. As you regulate your body and rewire safety into your experience, you'll find that your intuition becomes a trustworthy guide. No longer hijacked by fear. You're not broken. You're becoming. If these insights stirred something in you, good. That's not shame. It's awakening. You are not weak for feeling deeply. You're not broken for having learned to survive. Maybe your trauma shaped how you see the world. But it doesn't have to define how you live in it. Being an empath isn't about carrying everyone's pain. It's about sensing deeply while staying rooted in yourself. It's compassion without collapse. Intuition without anxiety. Giving without disappearing. And healing? It doesn't make you less sensitive, it makes you safe in your sensitivity. So here's your invitation. Step out of survival and into sovereignty. Your empathy is a gift, but only when it's led by your wholeness, not your wounds. Ready to go deeper? If this spoke to your soul, you're not alone, and this is just the beginning. Subscribe now to get more psychological deep dives, healing frameworks, and empowering information. Join our healing circle, where your softness is strength, your story is sacred, and your transformation is just getting started. You don't have to choose between being sensitive and being strong. You were always both.